of members on.
Okay. It looks like we've got 30, 31, 32. Numbers are popping up. So should we kick it off, sir?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Me here. Do you want me to kick it? Do you want to kick it, David?
If you've got some, please, if you could welcome folks, and I don't know if we want to take a roll call.
I'll let you. I'll welcome, and then I'll let you get into the business of roll call and all that. But do you want to say hello and thank you for joining us for day 3 of the IGBC winter meeting, fall winter. I guess we're not quite to winter yet. Really appreciate the folks that have attended the first 2 days. I think the engagement has kind of increased as we've gone. So I appreciate that. And I do appreciate folks showing up on camera, because it's easier to smile at someone else than just myself. So yesterday, as a quick recap, we started off with the report from the group. Hillary gave us the report out on the fatality from April. And again, you know, the intent is always, what can we learn to help us not have that situation occur over and over again, because it is heartbreaking when someone loses their life. It's bad for the Bears. It's bad for, you know, obviously the folks involved. And so appreciate that. We then went into some really good report out from the IE&O, and you know, Lori had a couple of opportunities to share with us yesterday, and just really showcase the good work that's happening, and some options for the future in regard to maybe how we move forward, or things we want to consider moving forward on. Always good that it's been fascinating to have our Canadian partners show up and share that they're really working on very much the same big topics that we are, and yet we know there's things we can learn from them, and so having them engage and share with us where they're at, what they're working on, what they're concerned about is very helpful. So we really appreciated that. And then and Scott Jackson shared, I think, some, or maybe it was still Lori, on the Bear Smart community program, and again, the option for that. We had good public participation yesterday. High appreciation for that, because we do need your input, and we need to hear from you on what you're thinking, what you're concerned about, what you are taking away from our sessions this week. So really appreciate that. Today, looking into, we laid this out at the end of yesterday, but today we're going to focus on our work plan, our organization, our strategic look at, you know, where we're at today and where we want to go. And so, David, I think you sent out some thinking around that either late yesterday or this morning to kind of get the executive committee primed. And so we're excited about that. We're going to kick off with that. And then we're going to look at this coming year, January 2022 forward. And what do we want to do as far as meetings? We have some opportunities. I think we've heard that, you know, we're all moving more towards being able to engage in person again. And nobody wants that more than I do. So we're going to talk about that and those opportunities and how we want this year to go. And then we'll again have a public comment opportunity at the end of the meeting, and then we'll adjourn. So David, I think just expressing thanks for folks who've been with us all week. Excited about what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully get some things lined out. Appreciate folks turning on the camera, and again encouraging. People were really Hugh and Matt, but a whole lot of others joined in on asking questions yesterday. And that's the intent behind these sessions, is to not just have presentations, but then to have that spur conversation. So hope folks are primed and ready for that. And then I will turn it over. I just took 5 minutes, David, so that's not too bad. And I will turn it over to you to start us down the path for today.
Great. Thanks so much, Jackie. And it's true. Today is the sort of committee discussion day. So when we get to that, it would be great to have cameras on and sort of engage. But I've got sort of one more presentation for you to, sort of an attempt to, oops, what happened? Summarize the, sort of where we are and what we need to accomplish over the next 2 hours, and as we think about heading into the next year. So I sent this list to the executives last night. These are sort of the 4 topics for today. And we're not going to get through, we're not going to have full discussion about every piece of this, but I'm hopeful that we can have some agreement that there's going to be, some of these things are going to be tasked between now and meetings that come up next year. So today, I think if we only do 2 things, I think the direction to the Bear Smart Communities group and coming up with your meeting plan in 22 is important. But I think for both of those, having a larger sense of the strategic orientation for this group. So you got on Tuesday, sort of the status quo of, here's where your resources are going and how you're organized. We had a discussion this past June. Well, so let me just start with Bear Smart Communities, and we will come back to this. This was my attempt, and Lori or others correct me when we get to this, of sort of the things that we have to sort of address, given that we are headed down this road, and we want to make sure that if we're going to go down this road, it's going to be a successful one. So a lot of really good questions came from committee members after that presentation from Lori and from Andrea, and we need to come back to that and spend some time on it. So I'm going to hold that for the moment. And that's the first item that we come back to. But I also wanted to put in context the discussion that we had this past June. So if you recall, IGBC, almost 40 years old, has had this sort of executive committee, subcommittee structure for that whole time. In June, we heard a proposal from Idaho Fish and Game to move, fairly radically to a conservation team approach, a thematic, range-wide, large-scale engagement on particular topics. And the brackets there are sort of my categorization. I'm trying to I'm a lumper, not a splitter, and you'll see that those are categories I'm referring to throughout. But it was a very good conversation. If you remember, the quote that Toby Boudreau gave us was, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And recognizing that, hey, there's some different things happening that maybe need different geographic focus, different participation focus. And that, of course, grew out of the overarching goals. Ken McDonald mentioned the 5-year plan yesterday, and IGBC has had that. And this committee, the executive committee, did have goals articulated in that plan. And again, they sort of break into this, conflict, habitat, science, IEO categories. And then there's some sort of strictly organizational things like, hey, let's communicate more effectively, or let's provide direction as an executive committee. And so you can see how that connected to what the proposal was in this June. But I think that at least my read from June, and we'll have to explore this when the committee engages this morning, is that the subcommittees were very strong in saying that the work that they were doing had value, and it was actually important to continue in their orientation. But there also was agreement that there are some issues that maybe are across of those geographies, or maybe more efficiently addressed at a larger scale. And also, maybe we need additional participants to make progress in some of those areas. So again, as I sort of mentioned yesterday, we're not going to be able to do a full strategic planning exercise as a facilitator, I'd love to be able to get you in small groups and really sort of work at what at this group at this executive level wants to endorse. But I think that this iterative discussion, the June proposal, the reports that you heard from subcommittees, which I'm about to try to attempt to summarize, if that's this renewal of the 5-year plan is something I'm proposing is an action item for the group for the coming year. So part of this was we asked the subcommittees, what do you want from the executive committee? And this is probably an incomplete list. And if there are subcommittee chairs that need to, see something that's missing, please speak up. But this, one thing basically was, hey, what's the plan? And how can we iterate and work together on finalizing work plans? And then again, this question of participation and linkages beyond existing geographies and in non-traditional areas. So we heard from subcommittees some of the same things we were hearing at the executive committee when we had that conversation in June. So what I want to do now is just a reminder, and this is a baseline again that we'll go back to, but we have the 5 or the 6 ecosystem subcommittee reports, and Ken reminded us of the 5-year plan, and the bullets that are in red here are the goal statements from that 5-year plan. And if folks have some tenure on this committee, you'll remember what that 5-year plan looks like. It's a very large spreadsheet, and there's a tab for each subcommittee. And you've got for each subcommittee a goal statement like these ones in red here. But then you also have objectives, strategies, indicators, planned actions. There's a lot of detail that if we're going to renew it, it would take, we may be able to simplify that. But at the goal level, actually, these are still fairly true to what the work is in the subcommittees. So this is what we heard yesterday or Tuesday from North Cascades, that they've got the 3 big goals, and they've got no action under the first because that's happening at the Washington level, but they are making consistent progress on their other 2 goals, and they're continuing to track that in the way that we have been tracking it. Similarly, Bitterroot, 2 very straightforward goals and quite a bit of activity. This JJ Tier and Sandy Fisher have done a great job bringing this group together. They've got short-term work that they're working on together, and they're thinking about what's coming down the road. Again, Cabinet Yak, same way. These are, and again, I'm going quickly because I just want to set the stage for, you got the question from the subcommittees, hey, what do you want? And one thing that may be okay is continue down this path, but let's try to coordinate in a different way. So interestingly, in the Cabinet Yak, they already have as a goal to increase coordination with NCDE. So they're recognizing, hey, there's a different orientation on the geography here. Similarly, for Selkirk, there's a recognition that they need to work on transboundary coordination. So that brings in both British Columbia and Alberta. North Cascades, which I went past already, had British Columbia present at their meeting this week. And again, as Jackie mentioned at the top here, figuring out the efficient way to engage seems an important for which level, at the executive level in these geography subcommittees or in another way. NCDE and Yellowstone are similar in that their top goal has been establishing and implementing a clear direction for recovery and for delisting. And we're in an uncertain place right now for that. We're just going to have to keep working in these other areas where there actually is tremendous work happening on conflict, on habitat, on research, and on coordination. And so Yellowstone, again, was interesting because they, for some time, have only had transitioning to delisting as the goal, and it's still the goal, but they're have active efforts with subgroups within their committee to work on conflict. And that has come out of the direction from this executive committee to focus on conflict. They're also actively stewarding their conservation strategy. And of course, they're a major center for scientific work with the Advanced Demographic Monitoring and the IPM. So, those are the ecosystem subcommittees. You heard yesterday from Lori about the IEO subcommittee, and it's interesting. Their goals almost seem too modest now. Improving our communication is something that we can and should be doing as a matter of just doing good work. Consistency of messages is something that's made possible by the convening authority here of, we are in an IEO group. We're doing things like biannual summits. We're coming together and sharing information and constantly sort of looking for the best, most effective messages, the most accurate information. Again, that seems like it's a core mission for this group. And then, increasing use of bear spray. That's something that if we're going to state that as a goal, we're going to want to think about how to measure that. But there may be even a higher level goal for this committee of reaching residents, reaching visitors, reaching different user groups to make sure that that our safety messages are being received and implemented. So again, if we move into a strategic planning mode, we may want to tweak that a little bit. And of course, if you're setting goals of that nature, you've got to put resources behind them. And so I think that's the iterative process that we can continue in 2022 meetings. So I mentioned yesterday already, again, resources behind it means we have to think not just about IGBC's resources, but if some of these goals are shared goals with many other partners, maybe we can grow the pie here, and maybe we can also take advantage of existing agency programs and just align them in a way that's getting to these collaborative, cooperative goals. And then as an executive committee, so we've had already a budget committee, are there other things that you might want to make small groups to work on in 2022? And so that's, a whole lot, and those are things that we can come back to. And again, my proposal is we sort of take this stepwise. We start with the Bear Smart communities. We make sure we leave time for 2022 meetings, and we have some discussion of, hey, where were we in June? Where are we now? And where do we want to go in thinking about our overall structure, our overall goals? Because this existing structure with executive committees, with subcommittees, does engage a lot of agency staff time, and it's worth thinking about. Are we getting from this engagement, from this commitment, what we hope to? So the executive committee, you have this list of 4 things in your email. You've now seen sort of the slides, and you can ask me to put those back up if it's useful for conversation. But again, my suggestion is let's break it into pieces. Let's start with let's start with the Bear Smart communities, which is sort of very tactical and near term. And then the other tactical and near term issue that we do have to get to is dates, locations, and any interim work that you're going to be assigning as an executive group. So I'm going to take this off the screen so that we can see faces as we move into this. And I see Scott Jackson has his hand up.
David, I don't know how I did that, but I apologize. I did not mean to raise my hand, but good to see everybody nonetheless. So, and thanks for that, the work you did on this overnight. Good conversation.
Hugh.
Yeah, David, I'll echo that. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's tempting to say, well, we might want to get to that conversation about looking at our planning goals again before we start to take action on other things, but recognizing that's going to take a little time for us to look at planning. I think you're right that starting with what we have in front of us right now in terms of some recommendations, some thoughts about Bear Smart communities makes sense. So I think what you've laid out is a good approach, and thank you for working that up.
Okay, well then, I think that the first order of business then is to try to, put ourselves back into the sort of excitement and engagement that we had at the end of Lori's presentation and Andrea's presentations yesterday. There were really there was a lot of creative thinking happening about, okay, well, if we see that there's, positive reaction in communities of, we would like, something like this, some sort of toolkit developed, some sort of capacity to engage and provide incentives to communities, but how would we actually do it? And there were a lot of really good questions there. And, we didn't have enough time yesterday to really run those to ground. So this is the chance to do that. So what do folks think? Or Lori, if you want to recap like sort of what you think that the needs are, or how do we get into this piece of the discussion? And Hillary's got her hand up. Hillary.
So thanks, David. I guess what I'm wondering about, I think we've talked about it, and Lori, I think you mentioned it yesterday, but seed money, the issue of, and you just mentioned incentive, David. I mean, there is a good amount of expense to become a Bear Smart community. And we talked about money for waste haulers or the trash cans, but there's probably a lot more. So Lori, what did Mike Badry, your discussions with Mike Badry in British Columbia, does he have recommendations? Like, what does BC provide? Do they have seed money?
So that's a great question. So he says it comes and goes. If Mike from the Providence wants to speak to that, maybe, because he just put his hand up, so we'll let him maybe go for it.
Sure, and I'm not as attuned to the program, but I know it's a growing program, and right now a lot of the funding does come from the jurisdiction that wants to be involved, whether it's a municipality or a city. So co-funding comes from that right now. And I think the other opportunity we're currently looking at is just like what we discussed yesterday with the presentation. Some of those in-between areas are starting to show interest in wanting programs like that, but difficulties in coming up with funding to support that, as well as in the agricultural sector. So we do have a livestock protection program that doesn't cover bears. Compensation is a part of it, but bears is not part of that program currently. And I know that sector is looking for support and action there. So it sort of builds on similar challenges that we heard about yesterday. I think some of the opportunities for funding for us that we're considering as we embark on the provincial grizzly bear stewardship framework, we're calling it, which is a provincial grizzly bear plan, is to hopefully get some more buy-in from some of the NGOs that do want to contribute to grizzly bear management. And I think through having a plan that's built collaboratively and transparently, like a lot of the work the IGBC is doing now, that we're hoping that will help us sort of build that trust and potentially leverage some funding contributions, maybe from some NGOs that want to support these IEO initiatives, which I think are tremendous. We're seeing really good results, just like some of those metrics you showed yesterday from some of the ongoing work, and just the fact that there's this increased demand for Bear Smart programs. And for us as well, a lot of the indigenous communities or tribal, I guess you call them tribal communities in the States, are really interested, especially in those areas where we're having a lot of high conflict. And same problem, it's generating revenue to help support those programs in those areas. So it does fluctuate. And as we were hearing those presentations yesterday, I was thinking about how I'm scared that Mike Badry might retire soon, just like many of your jurisdictions are talking about turnover of staff. And I want to make sure that that position gets supported. But sorry, I'll stop talking. That's a bit of what's happening in BC and how we're trying to, generate revenue to support the program.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Michael. And I think the big thing too, we've kind of come up with a list of things that we would like to help support communities in doing. And one of the big thing is that potential to have a wildlife consultant when they're doing their initial assessment of their community and then writing that plan. We really encourage them to have a wildlife consultant when they do that process. There's also education materials if they, need printing of any of that, signs, like you said, any kind of help with garbage cans and unbearable bins. So it was, in our minds, we were thinking about it as kind of like the small grant or the small funding that the IGBC provides for IE&O, but having something on the other side for Bear Smart communities to help them, supplement the cost of cash, a wildlife consultant or bear bins and things like that. I think Mike has his hand up.
Mike.
Good morning, all.
BLM.
Good morning, all. When I hear about standing up a new program, one of the first things I think about is, do we have the legal authority to do so? I know for my agency, we have to look at, is there a law, executive order, secretarial order, some kind of policy regulation that grants the authority to our bureau to either stand up, administer, or fund a new program? For BLM within Interior, on the Assistant Secretary of Lands and Minerals side of the house, I'm not aware what authority I would use to participate in this program or be able to have BLM funding go towards this program. There might be something on the wildlife side of the house, but I'm not sure what authority we have to be able to participate in this type of activity. So what I would like to see, and I think it's an exciting program, what I would like to see is a white paper really spelling out what the program is. What is the decision-making process? Is the decision-making process David as the executive director? Is it a consensus of the executive committee? What is that decision-making process? Again, going back towards what are the authorities? If I am a member of the executive committee, do I have delegated authority to make those types of decisions for the agency? Would I have the authority to sign our intergovernmental order or financial assistance that would cover this type of work? And I'd have to be able to ask my solicitor those questions to come back to whether our participation would be valid. It could come down to, if we don't have the authority in my side of the house, that we would have to recuse ourselves from the decision-making process towards Bear Smart, and that we would have to ensure that BLM funding was not going to support a program that we don't have the authority to participate in. So that's what I think about first when I hear about a new program, a new proposal, is do we have the authority to do this? And then if so, then I could dive into the logistics. But that's first and foremost. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Jackie.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get my head around this a little bit, because I don't think of this as when I think program, like a new program, I think it feels much different than I think this, when we think of this under IE&O and the development and the community outreach, that's all already within the world that we're working under our charter, I think, under our as it's currently laid out. So I'm not. So I probably need a little bit more help, David, on when we say new program, what are we actually, how are we defining that? Because I'm not sure for me on my side, and there's other Forest Service folks on that, I would put this into this like whole new thing that would take a whole new effort to umbrella, but I may be missing something. So I think we probably need to suss that out a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay,
and that's
well,
why I would like the advice of legal counsel, just to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll ask Lori for some clarifying on this, but again, I think the model was the British Columbia program. And again, that's a province. So our analog would be our states, which have all kinds of legal relationships with the communities within those states that are different, of course, than for us as federal land managers. So the states are critical partners in IGBC, and so one possible construction of this would be there's a shared set of certification that the IGBC states agree on, but that each individual state is the one that actually certifies a community as Bear Smart. And when we had that initial discussion, I think the thought was, well, but that might not be that would mean that each state would have to have its own, might not be the most efficient way to do it. There might be some efficiency of having the shared, this collaborative group of the 4 states plus the federal managers, handle it through one administrative portal as opposed to multiple. But that is by no means a settled question. And your question about, let's do it, we have to line it out very carefully in terms of decision. We're not ready for executive decision-making today. What we need to be able to give this group that's working on criteria is, some direction for what would be needed to get there at subsequent meetings here. But Hugh has a question.
Well, just building on your last point there, David, about what's needed to get there. I think, we talked at the beginning of this about trying to develop some additional funding sources for folks, and that undoubtedly would be helpful. But I guess it would be helpful for me to know, for those who've been looking at this, what are we hearing is the limiting factors for communities picking this up? Is it just a lack of funding? Is it a lack of awareness about, Laura, you walked us through the kind of steps in the process. Do folks just need to better understand that? Do they need to have a better understanding of what the benefits are for their community if they actually do this? So knowing what it is we need to do to help, what those limiting factors are would be helpful for me.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Hugh. Like we heard from yesterday, trying to just build that committee within her community of who should be on it, and and getting those people engaged. Part of what the working group is also doing is putting together kind of a package that any community that would be interested in, we would come to them, with a PowerPoint, like, you can give them a little stick and say, here's brochures, here's a 1-page summary of the program, here's a PowerPoint program that you can get, that you could give in front of your community, anything that, so that we can try to help them already educate in the beginning and get people interested, because we felt like that would really help it be more of a community-driven program rather than having a person from an agency go and talk about, hey, there's this great program, maybe you should do it. It would be the community actually hearing it from a community member potentially. So I think that is one thing, that you just nailed it all. Like, they don't really know what the program's about. What kind of incentives do they get from it? What is the big deal about being a Bear Smart community? But I think that there's a lot of examples from British Columbia that show the benefits of it and the reduction of conflicts and things like that. And then just educating, like tourists and recreators that might be coming to their community, they're going to have better information about recreating in that area. But there's a lot of things to do to get there. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges. I agree. And it's very new. So I don't know if we even know all the challenges yet we're going to face.
Can I ask a question, David? And so I think Hannah had actually prompted this, but the Bear Smart community, Bear Smart, the containers and the container testing, what did we do to, did that take special adjustments? That didn't, right? And we put money to that. So that's what I'm trying to, the comparison between what makes this that much different than the container program.
Yeah, I was just trying to answer Hannah's question, and this came up a little bit yesterday too. I don't know that I can answer, or I did talk to our Office of General Counsel probably 10 years or more ago when I started working on this program, but I don't know that I know the specific authority under which we do this. It was more of a, are we okay with this, moving forward and doing this? And the answer I got was, yes, we are. They didn't see any concern with it, but I don't know under, the specific authority. Like I said yesterday, their advice was to, maybe move away from using the word certifying to something like approving or endorsing, something that was a little less structured sounding. And it was more of being clear of what we're doing, what we say we're doing, and I just didn't hear that voice of concern. Like I said, there is a tie here between what we do require in food storage orders and a means of complying with that. I think that's a distinction here that does give us it has some import on this, but what is our, and maybe David, like you said, with the states may have a differing take, dealing with municipalities within their jurisdiction than the feds would have. The feds have this link to food storage orders, which maybe gives us some ability to require things under that. But but I'm going to ask that question of OGC for sure to get some clarification on that on my end.
Yeah, and let me offer, we know already Wyoming has its Bear Wise program, which is another model for what, and we're trying not to duplicate and engage with them on that. At the federal level, there are lots of programs that work with communities. I used to work with the agency NOAA, the National Weather Service, and they have weather ready communities. We're ready for extreme events, and there's there's a process. It's all voluntary, and I guess that's the recognition with this group. There's no statutory basis for IGBC. It's a memorandum of agreement between agencies for that collaborative work. So, but you're right, Scott. We will obviously need to line that out. Ken.
Thanks. I'm going to go back to I think your original question about what do we need to do, and what I heard from Lori's presentation yesterday is probably the first and the most immediate need is just some capacity, some staff help to do it, and so it seems like that needs to happen before you get into how much money do we need, or do we need seed money, or what do communities need. It seems like a staff person that's focused 100% on this becomes that liaison with those communities, and it may be, one needs technical help and another needs financial help and another needs both. And so I guess I can't speak to the authority question that's been brought up, but I guess my recommendation would be is again, can we get an idea of cost from Lori and Lori's committee of bringing on a person that could be focused on this, and we probably want a multi-year cost, because you need somebody that's going to have some longevity, not just hope I get a job and hope they keep paying it next year. And then is there a way to essentially do an assessment against all of the participating entities to cover that cost, at least to get it started and up and running. I do like, and I had the same feeling as our counterparts from British Columbia about this would be a great place for NGOs to contribute. So if we kind of stood up this Bear Smart community program, and we have staff that's helping with the administration of that program, the actual implementation, getting resources to communities would be a great place to direct some of the NGOs to put some of their funds that would be really value added to everybody and the Bears. So I guess that'd be my recommendation is look to, if we all agree that the Bear Smart community approach is a good one, then look to how can we collectively provide some capacity to get that on the ground, and then see if we can collectively raise the funds, or again, I think of it as an assessment that we commit to get it going.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ken. And yeah, we have already we have an appendix in the document that lists NGOs that help particular work. We have defenders with electric fences, and people that are different NGOs that have already said that they would like to be a part of it, and that would be potential wildlife consultants and things like that. So that's exactly what this person part of what they would do in their job description.
Michael has his hand up, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to, in British Columbia, part of the success of the program, building on Ken's suggestion about how do you have somebody coordinate or a person to support it. And so ours is done in partnership with the BC Conservation Foundation, which is a nonprofit. And so that's how we help sort of deliver it. That's how we've helped build capacity. So it's getting funding to support that group in delivering this program. And they're the ones that actually, go out and solicit from communities, or if we get input, like people connecting with Mike Badry directly, then that organization goes out and does the initial, starts if they're interested in that whole assessment process. So that's just a model that we're using right now in BC. I'd say it's underfunded as well, just given the demand for the program right now. But that model, I just wanted to present it as something to consider. I don't know if there's something like that we could think about here.
So along that same vein, I know that if we're going to stand up this program permanently, we need somebody permanent in the position or whatever it's going to be. But, maybe we need somebody in the short term, and maybe it's funding cobbled together by NGOs and it's out of an NGO shop versus a government shop. Or, there are ways that we can be creative about this. I think if we work together and figure it out, that we could get somebody as sort of a detail pilot program manager for this to get it off the ground, work out the kinks, and then invest in a permanent way to move it forward. That way we sort of have a proven pilot study behind us. We know what the issues are. We know what the challenges are. We probably know what kind of person needs to be in that role. And so that might be something to think about, is we get some sort of, like I said, I don't know if it's a detail opportunity in what we call in the federal world, or if it's an NGO funded, cobbled together with a whole consortium of NGOs on this. But I think there are ways that we can do it to get it off the ground in a pilot way, so that we have a sort of, I can't think of the right word, but sort of a proof of a concept, if you will. Just thoughts.
Yeah, to tag on to that, sorry I was late this morning, but Jennifer, I think that's a great idea. The idea of a detail. I suspect we could probably collectively put our heads together and come up with someone who is either fully employed or underemployed right now in the federal system, who maybe is a bear person seasonally and has some free time when the bears go to bed or something like that. But I like that idea to kickstart it, as opposed to waiting to cobble together the money, and God only knows how long it'll take us to get an agreement between agencies and figure all that out. But presuming that whatever agency found someone would be willing to kind of offer them up and continue to cover their salary, that would really be the only cost. So so I like that idea.
Well, we can definitely work on, I think, from hearing from Ken's comments yesterday too, we can, as a working group, we can definitely work on a position description, because I think that will be probably really helpful. And then potential cost that we can come up with. I have that for our next agenda.
And I think, Lori, what would, thinking about, are we going to do this as a pilot, or, so like what is the cost for the pilot? Vice, we have, if we went, so maybe breaking it out like that a little bit, and I'm not saying we have to start with a pilot, but I think that came up, right? There were pilot communities. We talked about Jackson, but what would that startup look like, Vice? Maybe if we And, you know, as we go through it, we'll find out the real cost, right? Because,
Yeah.
you know, that's part of the pilot, right? Of finding out, well, what is the real need and how should this, what should we tweak? So.
Mhm.
Lori, can you
Lori,
remind us what the timeline is on the framework that you guys are working on?
Well, I mean, we wanted to have it to you this meeting, you know, we were very gung ho and we thought we could do it, but just, you know, people's work lives and whatnot. So, but with Andrea on board being a writer, the writer editor, and because that will really help, because I think it's just hard for our working group to get that part. So we wanted a draft by the next spring meeting of, you know, kind of more of a consistent, you know, the chapters done with the criteria and the references all done and things like that. Like we really wanted to get this group something to look through and read through and have all of, you know, have a lot of bear specialists look at it. We've had a lot of, I have a list of like NGOs that are interested in reading through it just to get some feedback on it. But that, yeah, and the contract we have with Andrea, I do believe like we put in there May, like having some kind of draft so that then at our June meeting, we could have something that you guys have already read through.
Hey, Lori, this is Ken. One other question is, or thing to consider in that is who would that person actually work for?
Yeah.
You know, I guess there's different models we have within the IGBC and then other groups too, but it'd be good to have that as part of your recommendation.
Yeah, you know, and we have actually kind of talked about that, like what would be the ideal thing. And, you know, I don't know how you would do a joint state because, you know, communities are within these states and knowing state laws and things like that is going to be really helpful. And then, you know, or through the Fish and Wildlife Service. So it was kind of those were the two groups that, or the two different agencies that the state agencies or the Fish and Wildlife Service kind of make the most sense since we're dealing with private, you know, communities. But yes, we can look in that a little deeper too.
Jennifer.
Yeah, just jump in and then I'll shut up on this. I've been talking a lot, but
that's great.
Just again, some additional thoughts to Jackie's point about pilot and maybe the pilot happening in Jackson. You know, there's a ton of people down there, both in the NGO and maybe in Tetons. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Chip Jenkins, but who could serve potentially as kind of the pilot project manager for that particular one, which could then translate into a larger concept. So it's just, again, brainstorming and starting to think about a pilot and fleshing it out. And we can talk more offline about it, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
So again, just to recognize the work that Lori reported on yesterday. So we have this group that is representative of our states and our region. And it does include, you know, real experts, you know, that know you know, they're coming up with a consistent set of criteria, which is fantastic. And that's sort of the sweet spot for what our agencies bring. How to then support that is a challenge. And so Mike raised the authority question, the decision-making question, where do you put the, you know, the capacity? And then there's the question that was raised yesterday of, you know, maybe you redirect some resources that currently are going out in IEO. You know, maybe that is used in you know, as part of there's a whole set of funding questions about how do you, you know, get people incentivized to participate. So I don't know if all of those, Lori, you feel like your group can, you know, maybe I think some of those may be at this sort of executive level of, hey, we're committing resources, we're making decisions about, you know, you know, what you've got in front of you at this executive level. So, you know, we mentioned, you know, direction for the subcommittee. You're going to continue to work on the criteria. Jennifer has got some leads, and others I think do as well on possible initial pilots that, you know, but then there's these bigger questions of capacity and, you know, growing the pie in terms of dollars and then the legal side of things. So how, you know, in order to get to a place where maybe at some point in the coming year, you're able to say, maybe it's sort of back to Mike's initial question of what does that briefing memo look like? And then what do we need, what work needs to happen, to get you to that point? And one suggestion on the table is sort of a short-term detailee to help us work through that.
Yeah.
Well, David, one thing, I guess, as Matt pointed out, we probably could find a detailee. It might take us a little while to do that and get that in place. And I would hate for us to lose the momentum that's been built, by this initial committee. So, Lori, I mean, is that committee now disbanded? Is there, okay, yeah. And how much longer do we think they'll be able to stick together as we figure out a next step plan?
Well, I think we're pretty committed. I mean, as long as the executive committee is committed, it's something that, it's the group is mainly the IEO subcommittee. So, and then like David said, we pulled in a couple of the bear specialists from Idaho and Wyoming, just because we wanted to make sure we had the state buy-in there. So yeah, we're committed, as long as the executive committee as long as this is something they want to continue to move forward. Because if it's going to die in the water at the executive level, then there's no reason for us to continue. But if it's still something that this committee is interested in, we will continue to work. Now, Andrea, she's contract and we only have her for a specific amount of time, but I don't think that's a limiting factor, because we can always we can extend the contract if we need to, or we might not need her assistance in the future. So
yeah, and again, just so that it's clear, I touched on this on Tuesday, but based on previous conversations where the executive committee wanted to explore this work, we have committed resources next year, with Andrea Morehouse as a contractor, and again, that technical side of building the library, if you will, of resources that would be available to a community if they came to us and said, we're interested, what do you got? And it's it's all those materials that Lori was mentioning earlier. That's what's going to be created in a consistent way here, because we have this representative subcommittee, and then we have Andrea, sort of who's going to be our technical writer to pull that information together. Now, having that is not having a full program, right? We then need to think about what comes after, and that's what we heard Mike Badri last year, talk about that iterative process that he goes through. He's got his technical materials. That's the sort of not the hardest part. The hardest part is the working back and forth and finding the community leaders and just that's the challenge going forward.
And I do think, using Jackson, having one community as a pilot community, if it is going to be Jackson, and if we can move the ball forward there, they've already been in contact and conversations with, people and carnivores and some partners. So I think taking on one community wouldn't be hard for our working group, but we are getting asked from more communities, like, what can we do now? And how can we do things before, until the program's built? That's where it might get a little tougher. So.
Hey, Hugh, to your point, I already found someone in your region who's willing to do it. I'll tell you who they are later, but
I knew you'd be on it, Matt. I knew you'd be on it.
Yeah, I want to return the favor of stealing employees. So, so Lori, to your point, I don't know, David, what the heck the motion would look like, because it's kind of nebulous, but I'll make a motion subject to refinement that the executive committee endorse us continuing to move forward with this concept. And like I said, open to further refinement of what that motion would be, but just to get either a thumbs up or thumbs down from the executive committee about continuing to explore this.
I'll second it.
Okay, so motion to endorse the concept of continuing to explore Bear Smart communities. And my guess is, are there any objections to that motion? Hearing none, that is adopted, Matt. But the question then is, or I guess a friendly amendment is could we also commit to, some work that gets you to a point where, when would it make sense to try to have a fully fledged proposal that this committee could either adopt or modify or put down?
You asking me that one or Lori?
I'm asking the group.
Okay. I'm right there with you. I just wasn't sure how to commit to that, but I think recognizing the motion's already passed, if I'm happy to add that to it, and Lori with some idea, or maybe you want to think about it and come back to us, but I'd suggest we contemplate a call sometime after the holidays and not wait till our summer meeting, but try to keep this moving but I also want to respect the time of the people working on it and the time of the year it is. I think it's a balance of people's personal lives with hopefully a sense of urgency to keep this moving forward.
And just a question on that. So would it be a proposal for a pilot, or would it be the full-blown proposal? I would say a proposal for a pilot to start, perhaps, and then learn from that with a full-blown proposal.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I concur.
The only thing to think about, and I think I made this point yesterday, is Jackson is not your typical community in the West, right? And so whatever we build in Jackson, we want it to be, assuming that's where we start, we want it to be importable to communities where the billionaires don't outnumber the millionaires, right? Like we want it to be somewhere, we want it to be a program that other communities could afford to participate in.
Yeah. So I guess the only thing I can, the one thing that comes to mind is just doing a pilot. Like, what is that, like running it as a pilot? I mean, we would have them start the criteria, because it's not like this program happens like that, it doesn't happen in a couple of months. And so I guess I understand, like we could help them work to start a committee and work to start an assessment, but that right there could take quite a long time. And so then how they come up with, then they have to and then they have to figure out a plan in their community that comes with the timeline. So I really like the idea of having a pilot, but I don't want it to stall us actually continuing the program itself. So I guess I'm a fan of doing it together at the same time, just because if we just do the pilot part, it will stall out the working group, I feel like, because a lot of those people would not be involved with that. They're from other ecosystems and whatnot, but there are a few of us that can be involved in that and still keep the working group going, I think, or find somebody to help the pilot continue with their process.
It may be, Lori, like phrasing. So we decide to move forward with the program and we initiate a pilot to put it into practice. Okay. And so I think if we speak to it like that, where we commit to the program and we have a pilot to initiate what's this look like on the ground.
Okay. That's kind of how I feel too. Yeah.
I think we just have to phrase it clearly like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt, I think I'm going to say this, Matt, these words, I think you're right, though, because living in Jackson, Jennifer, you know this, it is a different world. So,
oh yeah.
It's not the real world most days.
But we also, we have to remember too, Kim Johnston has started this in Virginia City, so she, she has already been running through she's been using the BC one, but we're really modeling a lot of it after that. So we already do have a small community that probably doesn't have a lot of grizzly bears, they do probably nearby, but not, right there, but they may have some black bear conflict, but and it's a smaller community in more of a rural area. So we do have kind of example already being in the works, which I think we can really learn from. And then Wyoming, you know, their Bearwise program, we have a lot of good stuff there too. So I do agree. I know Jackson is a different one, and they're trying to do it on a county base, like a larger basis, which is a little different, but I still think it's going to be an okay spot to start, because the issues are going to transcend across. It's just where the money comes from might be a little different. So.
And I would agree with that. And, you know, there are outlying communities that maybe aren't within the county lines. I'm thinking like Du Bois and various other that aren't sort of typical Jackson, that may want to turn their attention to it. Cody, I'm also thinking of. I mean, I just think that we get started somewhere and help it expand. You also mentioned Whitefish, which I know can be thought of as maybe a resort town a little bit also. But again, you got to start somewhere. So, and I think we have high odds of success especially in a place like Jackson. And obviously we want to put our best foot forward on it. So I think that might be a good place to start for that reason as well.
David, can you have the minutes reflect that Jackie said she agreed with me on December 9th at, I think it was 10:29 Mountain Time.
Had to call
Lori,
that out.
Lori, since we have David now as our executive coordinator, I don't know that we need a liaison, for lack of a better term, from the executive committee to the working group, but if you saw value in, or do you see value in having some participation from some members of the executive committee with the working group? I don't know. I think David can serve as well, but I throw that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. But I think between David and I, that, you know, that I don't think that's something quite yet that we might need. Jennifer has expressed a lot of interest in being on our working group. So if anyone, I guess, is interested, but I think right now we can serve that role.
Very good. That's even better, but I just didn't want to leave you hanging if you needed a tie back. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Hillary.
I'd be interested in continuing to be involved, or somebody from my office.
Yeah.
I guess I was just thinking, talking about Jackson or Whitefish, both of those communities, I think we've mentioned this several times, either just approved or are considering ordinances. And so that might be some key thing that we think about when we think about the communities. They either, I mean, if the community is really serious about it, they would have to implement some sort of ordinance. And then, as Mike Philbin was talking about, then you have the city or the county who would be requiring these things, and we would not be. You know, that's not, that's already taken care of, or they're seriously considering it. And then we just guide with, you know, other types of things, but we're not out to enforce. That has to be a city council thing. So if they're serious about it, you know, maybe that's the place to start. And the two places we started talking about both are doing it. I hope in Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, when I listening to Mike and then listening to Scott, kind of, you know, some of the information from the solicitors, we don't have to say certified. I mean, we can just say IGBC Bear Smart Community. You know, we can take out that word cert. I don't see that word certified as being, you know, a deal breaker. So, and the levels are just, we just use the levels as incentives. And, you know, we need some backing behind those incentives, but right now we're trying to help them be like, it won't take, you know, an act of God to get certified, you know, or to get that lowest, we're a Bear Smart community. But if you do that, you know, here's what you can do. But as you build it, it'll just be better and better. So.
So David, did we have a motion then? And are we?
I think that, yes, I think we're on, in the Matt's motion is already carried that we are directing the subcommittee to continue the work in exploring in building the technical background, the documentation. And so it's really these implementation questions that this discussion has really helped crystallize in my mind. And I'm absolutely willing to be part of that group and think through some of those things. I think we'll need access to like the general counsel, and we need to think about how to vet some of those questions. And so what I'm sort of trying to think about is how to bring to this group a proposal for launching more broadly. I don't know if we could do that by June or December of next year. And again, we're in the business with this program is about carrots, not sticks. And if we make it clear that we're wanting to provide this technical support and potentially help direct some financial support, I think that there's going to be interest in communities wanting to be the first in the gate, and in that first class of that go through. So it's sort of exciting where the group is right now, but there are some thorny questions on the table that we need to figure out how to get you in a form that you can make an executive decision on.
But David, to that point, and kind of back to the previous discussion about assessing limiting factors. I mean, as part of this initial phase, if we could get even a bit of a gauge on what the demand is out there. I mean, I know we'd like to see it in many places, but it sounds like, Laura, you're already getting interest, coming from folks. So, knowing what that demand looks like right now I think would help us to make a decision moving forward.
Yeah, I think I got an email from Bozeman and I was like, whoa, that's a little bit too big. And they haven't said anything since, but I know the Bitterroot, Michelle Dietrich, who talked to you yesterday, she has a lot of interest in trying to start a lot of the communities down in the Bitterroot, or not a lot of the communities, but the communities down, get some interest from the Bitterroot communities. So I think there's just key people in areas right now that are moving forward. And so, so the Bitterroot Valley, there's nonprofit groups that are interested in taking that to some towns. And then Whitefish and Jackson. Other than that, I haven't really had any other people come to me, but we've just heard so much interest in the subcommittees saying that they're interested in this program, that's all I can really tell you, as far as I know. And so we've tried not to detour them, say, no, wait for the program. We've tried to say, well, here's the outline of the criteria. Any one of these things that you start doing will help. And so we've been really pushing it on them to start things. We haven't really said we can help you at all. And like Mike, and I do want to say, Mike, back in BC, he always does say, when it rains, it pours. So when they have a high, and I think that's why all of a sudden Jackson is on really the foreground of this whole thing, is when a community has a ton of conflicts. Whitefish, there was like, at one point, there was around 20 different black bears, family groups and single bears in the town of Whitefish this summer, causing havoc. And so that really upped Whitefish's interest in doing something to be bear smart. Jackson with 399. So, the next one could be, Missoula. We have or it could be a smaller community, along some other recovery boundary, but and then I think the Bitterroot's just interested because they have bears that have grizzly bears that have shown up, and the first thing everyone wants to do is move the bear somewhere else. But I think people are interested in seeing what the communities can do to keep the bears there and not get into trouble. So.
Okay, so the motion is already carried to continue. I guess when we get to 2022 planning, we think about, where in your meeting schedule you would like to engage more fully, and sort of what type of briefing and which boxes we would need to make sure we've checked in terms of the legal, the financial, the staffing, appreciate the willingness, though. It seems like there's some willingness from the executives to put some resources behind this and some capacity behind this, and look for the most efficient way to do it. So I think that, Lori, does that mean that you've got what you need from this conversation this morning?
Yeah, I think from this conversation, we're, you know, we'll just continue to charge forward but try to get some of these key things that we've addressed here put together for the executive committee next time we meet and want to talk about the Bear Smart Community Program. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if we go back to our big list, so we've given direction to the Bear Smart Communities group and to this group to start thinking about this, because we're gonna need you to engage, as you know, if we do formally move forward. And that's a recognition of at the highest level. You know, when Matt Hogan was chair, he had identified conflict reduction as a, you know, and asking subcommittees from the bottom up to bring forward that. And this is now, you know, an attempt to work with communities, or, you know, recognize that all the local efforts are actually, you know, that's a key area for us right now. So I don't know if it's useful to go back through the subcommittee, you know, what they're working on and what they wanted you to know about and what they wanted to hear from you, or if it's easier to back into that through talking about, you know, your time commitment in 2022. How do you want to meet? Where do you want to meet? And how do you want to build those agendas? And again, my proposal from earlier was I think that it's time to look at that 5-year plan. You know, even like this discussion we've just been having takes us at a higher level really on IEO, you know, in trying to promote particular practices in local communities. Jackie.
Yeah, and so following, tagging what David just said, and I think I've mentioned this once or twice over the last 3 days, it feels like for this, coming out of 2 years of virtual, that this year's, maybe we need to spend a little bit more time in regard to getting together or meeting. And there's an opportunity coming up. So I think, you know, normally we'd have the spring meeting and then the December. So one of the things we're promoting or at least suggesting is maybe we add one more session in there. And one of the opportunities that's coming up is the North American. The indication from the Forest Service side is trying to be able to have us attend in person. It's going to be in Spokane in March. And so thinking about is that, you know, many of us, if we get cleared to travel, would be there anyway. We would be attending. And so did we want to try to cut some time out on that? But lining up with what David said is, you know, this work and what do we want, you know, what kind of road signs or crosses do we want to get to and when? And so thinking about March as being mid-March being an opportunity, we're mid-December right now, that gives us, you know, what, 3 months or so to be ready to then move something forward in March. So and I'll just land on the March thing right now, David, but that would line up with like, when would we want, you know, something, or when do we think would be the next time to have something ready to go? Like,
Becky, if we did the North American, I presume you were thinking like a 2 or 3 hour meeting versus a 2 or 3 day meeting, right? Just because
Right.
everyone's so stretched there as it is, but
I was thinking we could tag on to the front end or the back end of it, and probably I was hoping for a half a day, Matt. But you know, I'm thinking if we could carve off time, you know, for folks on the front or the back end, and because 2 or 3 hours, it feels like that's not enough. But if we could even do like a session we're doing now with a 3 or 4 hour, probably a 4 hour block is what I would look for. Something like that.
works for me because I go to that meeting, assuming we're traveling again, but I don't know about see what others think.
I think we're getting close on the Forest Service side. I mean, our execs are back in the office. people are traveling. I mean, I've been able to take a few trips, so I think we're getting maybe closer. And I think by March, it just will be there. Sounds like USGS is there too.
Yep.
Okay.
Hannah.
We're allowed to travel with, considerations for distancing and masking and all that, but things are happening. So and I've planned, I had an in-person meeting in my office with like 3 other people.
It's exciting.
It was weird, but good.
So given that, just to look at logistics, we're fortunate to have Chris Smith from the Wildlife Management Institute. They're organizers of that North American conference. The question, Chris, about the date, I think it's the week of the 14th of March. And I don't know where the slot would fit for us. I think it'd be at the front end of that is my understanding. And then second, Chris, if there's any information you have about the planning that's happening in terms of in-person versus hybrid with that gathering in March in Spokane.
Yeah, David, the plan, at least the last I have heard, is to have the meeting in person in Spokane. It is the week of the 14th through the 18th. And typically associated meetings like this occur either on Monday or Tuesday of that week. The plenary and special sessions occur on Wednesday morning, and then Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and Friday are pretty well taken up by meetings of the committees of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So again, it would be probably best for you to plan on this either Monday afternoon or sometime on Tuesday.
Great, and Chris is, of course, one of the architects of our 5-year planning efforts in the past. So thanks for that, Chris. And I guess, so Jackie, for that 4-hour block, if we could carve it out of that busy week of meetings, what would the focus be? The current, the sort of the historic cadence that we're working on, and it's hard to even remember it now that we've been in COVID for 2 years, but June was field visits to really get to see and engage with partners on the ground. December, that we're doing right now, is your business meeting that historically has been in Missoula. So if we're adding an additional executive engagement, it's because it's part of a plan that we're moving towards and really making it worth that executive time and engagement.
So the 5-year plan, you just mentioned the 5-year plan. And for me, I think what I'm thinking is we do need to come up with a group that will take on kicking that off, David, because I think, I mean, we're not going to have the whole exact work on it, but I would, if we can get to that point today, where if folks agree that we want to start looking at updating that 5-year plan, identify some folks to work on that. And then we could go to that March meeting and get a check-in from Lori and the folks on the Bearwise community, and then hopefully have at least that initial layout of, and when I think about a 5-year plan, you want to look back on where you started, where you're at now, and then where do you want to go? And so hopefully if we can get a group working on that now, by March, we could have that queued up to lay that out to the execs and then say, okay, what have we missed? What do you want, how do we carry this forward? So, and that in itself would probably eat up,
So. I definitely think so. And it would require pre-meeting materials and engagement so again, it's taken me some time to get up to speed in this, but even just reflecting back to you where you've been, where you are, and help then facilitate a discussion about where you want to go. I actually do think that by March that would be timely, and you saw in what I've already showed, I'm starting to get to the point where I think support you in there.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking, and of course, Matt and the rest of the folks curious, but if we don't start that now, the year's going to get by with us. And if we can go to the field in June, I mean, that'd be another check-in date, you know, because we'll have some time in that week to do it. But time just gets by with us. And if we need to work on that 5-year plan, then, you know, that's part of what I think I'd like to have kicked off. But in the spirit of being open, please, anyone, if you have, if I'm off track on that, but if we don't, again, when's it expire, David?
Oh, I don't, it was last, we're still basically, it was put together in the 16-17 timeframe.
Okay.
And like I showed, those top level goals are still relevant. And so subcommittees are still putting planned actions against it.
But we're really at the 5-year mark for that 5-year plan, or pretty close, or yeah.
This is Ken. The plan is titled 5-year plan 2018 to 2022.
All right, so working on 2022 working on it in 2022 would make sense to carry it forward after into 23.
Yeah, and I was looking at it last night just to kind of inform myself for today, and I think it would be interesting to actually have a go back and look at what does the plan say, and then what did we do, because there's a lot of stuff in there we've never, it's front and center in the plan, but we've never even looked at or talked about.
Well, that's how I think about, you know, when you are moving forward, you've got to look at what you start with, you know, where are you at today? Like you said, Ken, there may be some things we still think are really important that we never got to. So do we bump those up? Or is, you know, we know there's some new things, you know, even as evolving right now with states, and how do we want to move forward with that? So, but I think what we need is a small group, and I'm willing to be a part of that group, but a small group between now and March to kind of take a look at that, and then be able to lay that out for the larger group at that March meeting. Would be and maybe make some proposals of here's what seems to be still relevant or new stuff on the horizon, and go through that process.
Yep.
Make sense? It'd be great to have you work with me on that, Ken.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay. So David, that's what I'm thinking. And then anybody else that has some passion and time on that. But when I think about my last year, I'd be really happy to have some work around that.
Well, that's a terrific offer. Anyone else interested in, and I wouldn't think this would be too many meetings, but we would have to, have at least a couple deep dives into how it's been, and then sort of help and guide me in bringing forward material for you in March. So is there anyone else willing to join Jackie and Ken and I in looking at the plan in between meetings here?
Well, I'm new to this committee, and I don't want to get in front of Matt in volunteering for Fish and Wildlife Service representation, but I'd be willing to help if you want a newbie perspective.
I second Hugh's nomination.
Thank you, Hugh. And it's actually helpful. Like, Ken, obviously, I've been involved in this whole thing since about 2010, but Ken, supersedes me. But having someone come in who hasn't is probably helpful, Hugh, because you're going to have a fresh eyes and not tainted by history. So that would be great.
One other point, and Chris can slap me if I'm out of line, but Chris Smith was the author of both the charter and the work plan, and as well as a lot of institutional knowledge from his participation on the executive committee for many years, and if he's willing, might be helpful to have Chris involved as well.
If he's willing, Chris.
Yeah, great. No, Chris is are continuing to be our partner. Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'd be glad to serve in an ex officio capacity.
Well, we welcome that. So that's probably a pretty good group to start with. If anybody else though has passion or desire, we welcome it. I mean, it's good to have that core group, and I'll work with David to get something on the calendar, probably in January. I'll give y'all a break for the holidays, but probably try to schedule something in January. And, but if anybody has an interest in working with us on that, we would welcome it. So just let David or I know.
Okay, so we're making progress on the list that I sent out last evening that we started this meeting with. Because again, I'm trying to think about your meeting engagements and also the work that you're standing up. So you've given direction to the Bear Smart Communities group. The subcommittees, are reported out terrific work that they're doing. As an executive committee, you're taking on 5-year plan. We already have a standing budget committee, which I think does, as I pointed out, there's several issues that we still need to deal with there. And so as we continue this conversation, if there's any other topics that, that came in through this meeting that we think needs some effort by executive committee members in between meetings. And again, we're now looking at March 14 or 15. We need to talk about when and where for June, and sort of when and where for December as well.
So for the June originally, and Toby had been here or had offered this, but we're not set on it. And so definitely open for folks, because thinking about what issues are in front of us, where would that field engagement make sense? We're open, and dates right now, if we can land on them, which my goal is to land on dates now for June, for the whole year, at least to start with that. But so the when in June, and then the where in June. So originally, I think Toby had thrown out when he was talking about it up. Where was it, David?
Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah. Coeur d'Alene, yeah. And so what's the group think? Thinking from a field perspective, thinking about where the engagement would be most meaningful, because it would be a chance to, engage with people who are living with this.
Hey, Jackie, this is Ken. Just looking at our 5-year plan, one of our goals is increase attention to recovery in the Cabinet, Selkirk, North Cascades, and Bitterroot ecosystems, and the objective is hold at least one summer meeting in each ecosystem. So Coeur d'Alene would fit that 5-year plan objective pretty well.
Okay, well, we're open to it, and if the rest of the group, what we'll do is need some help from that. That was Toby was kind of, I think, leading the charge on that. So I mean, David and I can definitely work on that too, but it'd be helpful if we get some help from maybe the state partner on that, setting it up would be helpful. But open to that location for sure.
I certainly don't have a problem with that one. I feel like we went to Coeur d'Alene once, didn't we? In the not too distant past, and have we hit all the other ecosystems that Ken mentioned already? I know we've done the North Cascades. We looked into the Cabinet Yaak last time we were in the NCDE, right, Ken? When we were at the bison, when we were up in the bison range. So does that count?
No, that's NCDE. We did go to Bonner's Ferry a couple years ago.
That's
too.
right. It was Bonner's Ferry.
I was at Bonner, yeah, and I was
you're
at
right.
that meeting. I was there with you, Matt.
Yeah, so not Coeur d'Alene, sorry, Bonner's Ferry. So I clearly don't know what I'm talking about.
So the Bitterroot is the other place that has been needing attention.
So this should truly be a group decision. I have no problem moving forward on stuff, but location wise, you all know it better than I do. I mean, I know the Yellowstone, and we've been there, so we're not going there, but David, help me get this to a landing.
Well, I mean, so I've pulled up and I can, I'm trying to look at that where you have been. So 2021 and 2020, you know, it was all virtual. In the summer of 2019, it was Missoula. Prior to that, it was Polson, NCDE, Shoto, NCDE in 2017, Bonners Ferry, Selkirk Cabinet Yaak in 2016, Glacier, NCDE in 2015, Winthrop, North Cascades in 2014, and Dubois, Yes, in 2013, and then Lowell, Idaho in 2012. So there, you can see that rotation around the geography has been a feature here of your summer engagements. And really, frankly, anywhere you go now is going to be timely because we haven't been anywhere for so long.
Okay. So, I mean, short of anything else or any other suggestions, I'd still come back to Coeur d'Alene then, just because I'm not hearing anything else. I heard you say that would fit. Again, open if somebody else does have a suggestion, but if not, we can land on that.
The other thing, Jackie, we had talked about, and this might be a bridge too far, particularly now, but should we, with Canadian participation again, should we think about a north of the border one, maybe not for next summer, but maybe summer after? Again, when we were in the Cascades, I think we snuck across the border, if I recall correctly. Don't tell anyone, Michael. But I don't think we've done anything. I know we've never done anything formal up there, and it might be a good opportunity to further incentivize Canadian participation so they find value in this group.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And actually identifying that now, because there's just things from agency perspectives going international. I mean, I've been up to Canada on with SRM, range management. And so we just, that's probably the right time to, Matt, to identify. And so David, sorry. Let's make a note of that. And of course the Canadians have to be willing to have us come north, but I think it would be worthwhile.
They may have to start working on it now to get approval for a year and a half from now.
Yeah, that's the thing. It just takes a little bit of time, but doable.
The other thing to think about if you're thinking about 2023 meetings is the opportunity to recognize IGBC's history with that anniversary.
That's the 40th anniversary. Is that right, David?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, without any, not just passionate, but any other suggestions, I'd say let's maybe go forward, David, or how do you want to handle that?
Yeah, the harder part, and it might take us 30 minutes, so hopefully not, but is the landing on the dates, right?
So we're talking June, so most of us can probably pull the calendar up and look at absolute yeses or absolute nos.
Where do you want to start? Which week do you want to start with looking at? Week of the 6th?
Yeah, the 6th, 13th. Yeah, the 6th or 13th is open for me. The week of the 6th or the week of the 13th.
June looks wonderfully open.
Oh, you're retiring, but you can come visit us, Mike. So what's that look like for the rest of you?
Those first 2 weeks of June look good for me, just to jump in, add a voice.
Okay. Thank you, Hugh. It's just like looking at myself and talking to myself gets kind of scary.
When you talk to yourself, you always get the answers you want. So
I know. Well, sometimes, Matt. Sometimes no.
I'm good those first 2 full weeks as well.
Okay. The first, yeah, actually the week of June 6th is probably better for me. Does anybody have, okay, so let's try this. Does anybody have a hard issue with the week of the 6th of June?
The week of the 13th is better for me.
I can make the week of the 13th work. Anybody else have a preference between or an issue with the 6th or the 13th?
The other thing, I guess the 13th might be better because it might give some more time for subcommittees to complete their spring meetings.
Okay. Going once, going twice. I mean, if we can Hugh and Matt and the rest of folks, anybody have an issue with the 13th? Like a hard, okay.
I'm good.
So the dates would be the 14th, 15th, 16th.
Yeah.
You know, sort of, we figure out how we're gonna make the agenda. Again, we're looking for, okay, I'm seeing positive things in chat. So Idaho, June 14, 15, 16 is a hold. You know, we'll get that on the calendars right away.
Yep.
So the next one is the December engagement. And again, historically, that's been Missoula. And it's the business focused meeting where you're reviewing, you know, your programs and your planning. And so thoughts on that?
This is usually when I pipe in and talk about the lovely winter weather in Missoula, but I won't do it this time.
No, because I'm kind of missing Missoula, Matt, just a little bit. I mean,
Yeah,
we
well,
just have
spend a day there and then you'll miss the sun. So
and I don't know, how did it ever, I mean, for you folks who have been here forever, and I'll look at Mr. McDonald or Matt, I mean, how did the Missoula Center of the Universe thing happen?
Because I think that's where the executive director worked out of and the Forest Service folks.
Okay. So Forest Service folks from Region 1, is there a hard driver for, I mean, you know, we can look at moving somewhere else. You do want someplace that folks can get into. And so you know, we're asking people, many of us will be flying in. So you need someplace that has flights and central driving for those who, you know, someplace like that. So I'm not set on Missoula at all.
Yeah, I don't think we are either. Especially with the cost of hotels that have skyrocketed in Missoula, the need to get waivers to pay 200% over per diem. If there's somewhere that's not being observed, it might be easier. Maybe that will change in a year, but we've really seen that in the last few months here.
I think one of the reasons, Jackie, was we went back and forth between Missoula. We throw Bozeman out there, but I tried when I was chair, but you think I was asking to change the day of rest from Sunday to Monday or something. But I think we have a lot of folks who are in Bozeman as well. So Hillary's going to kick me later because she's in Missoula, but Bozeman, I don't know if Bozeman is experiencing the same explosion in hotel prices.
Yeah, they have most of Montana.
I don't know that we've got enough lead time for the logistical side of this, that this doesn't have to be decided right now, the location.
We can land on the week.
But I do think that the looking at the week and getting the dates on hold. And again, I guess I would start the bidding, Jackie, in the second week of December, which is the week of the
5th.
12th.
I can't, I've got a conflict the week of the 12th. So
Okay.
I'm open the week of the 5th.
Okay, then it has to be there because then the following week is you're into
Christmas.
Yeah. So, and the challenge there, we'll just have to work with the subcommittees. You know, just you saw this week that we were still having subcommittee meetings when it was executive committee time. So just a scheduling. Well, if we get our date out
But if
there.
we
that'll be-
land on it, yeah, if we land on it now, they should be able to adjust back a week or so, right?
Sure.
There are subcommittees.
So 6, 7, 8 then of December would be the proposal right now.
Yeah. And to be determined on location. We'll work that out.
You know,
Okay,
I know they said the North Americans in Spokane, but like for the Pacific Flyway, we a lot of times just use Spokane as a default because it's got a you know, a decent sized airport to get in and out, and it worked pretty well. So that might be a consideration as well.
trying to think what other locations that are in proximity. I don't know, we'll do some comparison. I can even have my folks run through like like Chris, what you're saying, you know, what are the situations, so I can have my exec assistant run through cost comparisons, you know, for different locations that make sense. And then we should be able to, maybe we can talk about that, David, in March, location wise, but I'll do some work between now and then for like all the obvious. I mean, we'll include Missoula, Bozeman, we'll look at Spokane, we'll look at, you know, again, thinking about airports of what makes sense, and I'll have her run up some comparisons. But we have dates, right? Well, does anybody have a hard issue with the December 5th at this point? Nobody probably even has anything on their calendar much.
So it'd be the 6th, 7th, 8th of December.
Yeah, yes, right.
All right, we will put that hold on the calendar, and thanks for that. So we've got about 15 minutes left here, Jackie, and I guess we haven't heard much from subcommittee chairs this morning, and I wonder if the discussion that you've heard here from the executives, if you feel like you have, you know, a good concept of what you're doing in 2022, and then if there's any other questions that you had wanted to see discussed here, maybe now is a good time to bring that forward. Ben.
Yeah, thank you, David. Nothing much to add. Outstanding synopsis this morning. In terms of future work, that is yet to be determined. So that'll spill out of the planning that is going to happen over this next year. Just really appreciate the coordination you've been doing and the reception from the committee.
Thanks, Ben. Ben is the Selkirk Cabinet Yak Subcommittee, and Kristen from the North Cascades.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, really appreciate the dialogue. The strategic planning is very helpful for us, and also the dialogue regarding potential reorganization and structuring. That was something that our subcommittee did want to have a look at due to some of our unique needs, and how best can some things be handled range wide versus each subcommittee kind of doing some of the same work. And I think our earlier dialogue about some of our I&E work, that definitely is something that really does lend itself to more of a broader approach than trying to replicate a lot of efforts. So yeah, where the committee can really look at the what and the where for us, we can definitely fold in the how that makes the most sense for our particular situation. So looking forward to those strategic conversations moving forward.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, well, I guess I'm trying to make sure that we're not leaving any loose ends, and that we do have a lot of sort of moving parts in this, cooperative enterprise. And it sounds like all those parts are feeling like they know where we're headed here for the coming year. And that part of that's going to be trying to sharpen up the goals and also put in place, strengthen the existing programs that you heard briefed yesterday, and maybe thinking even about some new territory, working more broadly with communities. So Jackie, I guess I feel like maybe it would be useful to go through what the motions were and decisions today at this point. So I guess on the there were the 4 topics on Bear Smart Communities. The subcommittee is going to continue work on the technical criteria and sort of materials for communities to use, and think through some of the staffing needs and capacity needs, and also work with people like me and Jennifer Carpenter to think about how to find how to think through some of those implementation questions. I'm going to stop and make sure I got that right. So the subcommittees are going to continue the work they've got planned. Those large high level goals are really still still relevant. You heard about some new areas. So like Yellowstone has got these working groups that are trying to they're also sort of thinking about their strategic orientation, and we'll learn more about that in the spring. And they're continuing to work obviously on conservation strategies and some of the core efforts. For the executive group, in terms of action that you're taking on, the big one is this 5-year plan revision or update. And we've got a small group that will include our chair, Jackie Buchanan, Ken McDonald from Montana, Hugh Morrison from the Fish and Wildlife Service Pacific region, and Chris Smith from WMI, who's got the history of how this has worked with this group. Let's see, the other big one for this other ongoing work of a subgroup of executives is the budget committee. And on that one, it's, we have an opportunity to look at, there's this concept of NGO partnerships and additional capacity towards, things that might be identified in a collaborative way as needed on this large landscape by this diverse group of this committee. And so that's a topic for this budget committee of how do we currently have a partnership with WMI that is allowing us to do work in the bear resistant container world and in the in working in providing support to nonprofits and communities and agencies. And so we want to look at that structure, and we want to think about possible ways to expand that. So that's the budget committee. So we've got a 5-year plan committee, we've got a budget committee, and I think that is what we had for the executive group in terms of things that you're taking on. And also, I guess, sort of, there were several that voiced their willingness to help on the Bear Smart communities in some specific ways. I'm going to need some help on things like the legal side of things. So that's what we have for the executive group. And then in terms of how you're going to engage with each other, we're going to hold likely March 14th, maybe March 15th in Spokane, a half-day meeting on the shoulders of the North American Conference. And that one will likely be focused on the 5-year plan and the work of this subcommittee. We'll have a meeting in June on the, where did it go? I lost the dates. On the 14th, 15th, and 16th, likely in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And that will be a field visit. And so we'll want to work with the subcommittees in planning what, what sort of engagement is useful and what we might want to showcase in coming to that part of the world. And then in December would be the business meeting. It'll be the 6th, 7th, 8th of December. And Jackie's going to take a look at the history of, why it'll either be Missoula or some other place. And we're going to look at sort of most efficient in and out for that, because that's generally been a business meeting. Anything missing? Any other thoughts for the group? Kristen, sorry, I missed your hand being up. And maybe that was from before.
Apologies, it's a very tired hand from before.
Okay. Fair enough, fair enough. Well, we're at the point here, Jackie, unless there's anything else that folks want to address, the other one that is probably going to be part of the strategic planning is this question of participation, and where we're taking on new tasks that require working with other partners. We mentioned, we heard a presentation yesterday on livestock conflict, for example. How do we work with the other agencies and partners that have expertise and capacity on some of those areas, and that likely will come up in this context of the strategic planning. But I did just want to flag that, because that's been an ongoing question. So Jackie, I guess I'll put it to you. Are we ready to hear input from the public?
I believe so. If hopefully the public, I don't know what we had schedule wise, but I think, we don't need to drag things out. I think we've accomplished what we had for the agenda today. So if the public is ready, I think we are. And is Dylan on, or is Dylan?
Yeah, I'm happy to help if you guys would like me to.
Dylan, thanks again.
Yeah, if any members of the public would like to address the IGBC Executive Committee, please, at the bottom of your screen, click raise hand. And that will prompt me to allow you to make your comment. Or if you'd like to type it into the Q&A, you can do it that way as well. So again, please click raise hand if you have a comment or question for the IGBC, or type it into the Q&A. All right, see Claudia Narcisco's raised her hand. Claudia, if you could please unmute yourself and state your name and where you're from.
Yes, Claudia Narcisco from beautiful Missoula, Montana. Yes, at first I wanted to say I was really impressed with David's ability to pull together and summarize some of the strategic elements. And I liked his PowerPoint. Hopefully it'll be posted and so the public can have access to it. And then the Bear Smart Communities discussion was very exciting and actually hopeful. And earlier in the week, I commented on being discouraged because of the petition to delist that just popped, basically, seemed to push a lot of the good work that has been done over many decades aside. Maybe I'm interpreting that wrongly, but that's how I feel. And I see an opportunity for the Bear Smart to be like a culmination of quite a bit of the different work. I encourage you to think, big and bold on that and to, just grab it by the balls, because things are moving, and I'm afraid that, all these science and habitat questions, conflict resolution could be left by the wayside if other efforts are prevail. So these are some of the thoughts that I had. And this is like, I consider myself an owner of this, I'm a taxpayer, all of this is a huge amount of money that has gone into this recovery effort over the decades. And I own it. So this is what I some notes that I thought, there was some discussion about like having communities raise their hand and express interest and to assess the demand. I think that the IGBC should be more proactive and actually define the communities that are most essential. So to pull out the maps and get a landscape scale, involve scientists and biologists on defining where do we need to elevate the public's involvement and participation and the community's ownership in this, rather than waiting for them to say, hey, I'm interested. Where, and they could be, in my vision, more of a core, and the other communities aren't excluded. They could be like satellites to the core, but we need to find these hubs, these connectivity points, and that can help get some money and funding. I know there's the Biden has that 30 by 30 program. So that might be a source of like real money. And so let me see next. Identified comments most beneficial to communities, most beneficial connectivity, 30 by 30. Yes, I basically said a lot of what I have here. Science, habitat, and economics. I mean, because some communities might be resistant. We've talked about conflict, centers of conflict with the livestock. They might be resistant, but maybe if they saw an economic benefit. And I thought I was part of an organization. It was called the Ice Age Flood Institute. I have a background in geology. I used to live in Eastern Washington. And they ended up putting together I guess it came under the Park Service, but a trail for all of these key like glacial features. And so maybe these communities, these bear smart communities could be something like that. I mean, obviously a much different, different scale. But that's kind of an idea. And involving the science team, identify, important habitat to protect, the anchor points, like the wilderness study areas, the IRAs, inventory roadless areas, and where the bear is going, connectivity corridors, that sort of thing. Help define where the essential bear smart communities would be, rather than, as I say, being more proactive in that regard. And, kind of I put down, that movie, the Kevin Costner movie, build it and they will come, approach, rather than to just, well, okay, let's assess the demand. But part of it is that time is of the essence. I'm just fearful that all the good work that has been done will be undermined if some of these other political drivers are allowed to prevail. So that's kind of my comment.
Thank you, Claudia. And that reminds me too that we are recording these meetings and they're being posted on a new IGBC YouTube page. So anyone who'd like to go back and review these 3 days of meetings, they are uploaded there. And David, I'm not sure where those if we'll have a link or something on the new IGBC website to get folks to that. And then I believe David's also posting a lot of the material that we shared these last few days. So thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, Dylan, while you're waiting for other hands,
Well,
that's a
I have
good,
another, I wanted to say something else. And because I thought earlier on, I put it in a question and answer. But, you know, some of these really big foundations might be more interested in funding something that has like a regional reach. I know Pew gives millions of dollars to some of these, you know, fairly local regional groups. And that's just one. I know the Sierra Club has a foundation. Probably there are a lot of them. You know, you guys are what more aware than I am. But something that has a regional reach might, you know, just think big. Might be more than just, you know, trying to draw on the same small groups around. And I know the Fenders has done a wonderful job and put so much into it. But, you know, I think just think big. And that's kind of wanted to add that, the economic component onto it and the funding component. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claudia. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to remind folks that exactly what you were saying and show them where to find it. So if you go to the committee page, the executive committee page, the PowerPoints are posted, not this morning's yet, but the ones from the previous 2 days are there. And there are links in the past, it's under past meeting materials is where this is, to the video also. And again, I'm not sure that we'll be able to continue that if we go back to in-person meetings, but while we're virtual, that is something that is easy to do, and we're happy to do it.
Awesome. Any other members of the public who'd like to comment to the IGBC, please raise your hand by clicking raise hand at the bottom of your screen, or type your comment or question into the chat or Q&A, please. And maybe last call, I guess, if anyone would like to comment, please, here's your opportunity. And please raise your hand by clicking raise hand at the bottom of the screen, or typing your comment or question into the Q&A function there at the bottom as well. So we'll just kind of pause here for a few moments and see if there's any final comments or questions.
I'm not seeing anything, Dylan.
Nope, doesn't look like it.
Okay, I'm looking at on all the list. Okay, so David, I can give a few closing, or do you have something?
Please, no, go ahead.
All right, so it's a reflective time of year, right? We've just had Thanksgiving. We're in the holiday, whatever you celebrate, it's a holiday season. And so of course I reflect a lot, you know, both personally and professionally. And I think most of us coming through COVID in the last 2 years that we've had, I hope most of you are where I'm at, and grateful that I think we're at least moving into a different time. And I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were. But I think we're going to get back into something that's going to feel a little bit more like being able to move out on traveling and being able to pick up some of the slack that we've experienced in this virtual world. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that everybody stayed with us over the last 2 years of these challenges. And when I think looking ahead, what's in front of us, we have some important work to do. And so I am going to express gratitude for folks, and when I say that to the collective, to all of the federal partners, the state partners, the NGOs, and the public, you know, that have stayed with us and will stay with us as we move forward. You know, one of the things I've learned over the last 2 years, I have no idea how to predict the future, because I wouldn't have predicted what we just went through, couldn't have seen it. But I'd say, you know, we've shown a resiliency, we've shown a commitment. And so just, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all of you that continue to be a part of this important work. I'm grateful because I was telling someone the other day, you know, in my career, I know what I went to school for. It was to be in natural resources and to be able to be a part of managing the landscape and the species on it, and the air and the water and everything in between. And yet most days I feel like I'm a budget manager, I'm a personnel manager, I'm an HR manager, I'm a social liaison, I'm, you know, all these other things than what my real passion was when I started off on this journey. So for me, being a part of this group and having a part of this work is truly one of the highlights, you know, of a career that some days feels like I really am that pencil pusher after all this time. So I'm personally grateful for the chance to engage. I've got 1 year left as the chair, and I'm committed, more committed today than I was actually terrified 2 years ago when I went into saying I would do this. But you know, I actually do very little. Folks like David and the subcommittee folks and the rest of the execs, you know, it's that complete team effort. So I am committed to see out this next year, see what we can do. And I just look forward to working with all of you in that next 12 months. And I'm not going away. I have no plans to go away after that, but then I'll just be back in as a member. So excited about it. But have a safe holiday season. Take the time to rejuvenate yourself and be with loved ones, hopefully, and we'll see you in the new year. I think that's what I would say, David.
That was beautiful. Thanks so much, Jackie. Okay, well, we have our marching orders. We'll be busy in 2022. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.